Most people today think childhood feels simple, safe, soft. But Viking children lived a life so harsh you would break in days. Their world demanded strength before they reached 7 winters. Their hands carried firewood before they learned full words. Their legs crossed frozen streams while adults watched from far away. And in one small village at the edge of the northern coast, a single boy and a single girl lived through trials that would crush most grown people today. You clicked this story because you saw the title, Viking Children Lived Harder Lives Than You Think. But you will not forget the 2 young lives at the center of this tale, because their story shows what a child needed to survive the North, and what they lost along the way. You step into the life of a Viking child now, a life with no time for softness, a life where strength grows before height, where the cold tests the young before it tests the old. This story follows a boy named Eric and a girl named Svala, 2 children who face trials most adults today would not last even 1 day through. You will see how they woke, how they worked, how they fought cold, hunger, fear, and demands that pressed on their shoulders long before they reached adulthood. Those who lived these days carried marks deeper than scars. Before we step into their life, take a slow breath. Let your shoulders lower. Let the air settle in your chest. Pull a blanket close or dim your lights a little if you want the mood of an old hall settling for night. Tell me where you watch from. I enjoy knowing where these stories travel. As you listen, stay warm, stay steady. If you want more stories like this, you can subscribe or leave a soft comment. It helps keep these long nights filled with history and calm sound. Now we join Eric and Svala, 2 children shaped by snow, by work, and by the demands of a world far harsher than ours. Eric woke before the first hint of light touched the sky. His breath left small clouds above his face. The longhouse always felt cold at dawn, but children did not wait for warmth. He rolled from his small bedding of furs and straw and placed his bare feet on the floorboards. The wood held the night's chill. He pressed through it without sound. His mother slept nearby with his younger sister, pressed close to her chest. He moved past them slow so he did not wake the baby. The fire in the center of the hall glowed low. A thin red line still ran through the ashes. Eirik knelt beside it. He placed small sticks on top and blew until the glow brightened. He fed the flame with patience, enough to warm the air, enough to keep the hall steady for the morning. He did this every day. He learned from his father before his father sailed east and never returned. Eirik kept the fire alive for him. A voice sounded behind him, soft, low. "You wake early again." Eirik turned his head. Svala stepped from the shadows by the far beam. She wore a thick wool cloak that looked too large for her small frame. Her long hair hung over one shoulder. She held a small bundle of sticks in her arms. "I saw smoke through the wall," she said. "I knew you already rose." Eirik nodded. The fire needed breath. Svala knelt beside him and placed her sticks near the flame. "Good, we cook soon." The hall around them stayed quiet. Adults slept after long work the night before. Children moved before adults moved. This rule never changed. Eirik stood and walked toward the door. Frost covered the frame. He pressed his shoulder to it and pushed it open. Cold air hit him like a wave. Snow stretched outside in smooth white layers, untouched since the night wind settled. Svala stood behind him. "We fetch water first." Eirik nodded again. He stepped outside. Svala followed close. The sky still held darkness. Only a faint gray line glowed behind the hills. Their breath filled the air in thick clouds. They followed a narrow path to the stream. Snow reached their shins. Eric pushed through with steady steps. Svala kept pace behind him. The sound of running water grew louder. The stream never froze fully. It cut through the snow like a wound, always moving. Eric filled the wooden bucket. His fingers stung. Svala took her own bucket and dipped it under the surface. Her jaw clenched. She breathed sharp through her nose but did not speak of pain. Children did not speak of pain. They carried the buckets back toward the hall. Water sloshed over the rims and froze on the wood before it reached the ground. Their arms shook. Eric stopped once and switched hands. Svala kept walking without break. "You can switch hands," Eric said. She shook her head. "Not until we reach the fire." Eric did not argue. Svala forced strength from places Eric did not understand. She lived in the same longhouse, slept under the same cold roof. Yet she walked the snow as if she owed it something. When they returned, the hall glowed with weak light. The fire Eric revived now gave heat. Svala set her bucket near the hearth. Eric placed his beside hers. An older woman named Brindis stirred from her bedding. She sat up slow. Her back cracked as she straightened. She looked at the children. "Good. You brought water early," she said. "We boil broth before the men rise." Eric nodded. Svala stayed near the flame for warmth. Brindis poured water into the pot. Eric handed her dried fish from a wooden bowl. She tore it into smaller pieces. Brindis glanced at the children again. "Eat a scrap." Svala shook her head. "We wait." Brindis frowned. "I said eat." Eric took a piece. Svala followed. Brindis nodded with approval and returned to the pot. Voices rose from the beds around the hall. Adults woke. The longhouse filled with shifting bodies, loud breaths, the rustle of wool and leather. Men stood and stretched. Women rose and prepared tools. Children moved aside. Eric stepped back as people passed. Svala stood close enough to the fire to warm her hands, but not close enough to block anyone else. The chieftain of the village, Herolf, stepped into view. His beard carried frost. His shoulders filled half the walkway. His eyes swept across the hall. He saw Eric and Svala first. He always saw the children who worked hardest. "You start early," Herolf said. Eric kept his gaze low. "Fire died in the night," Herolf nodded. "You kept it alive." Svala straightened her cloak. "We brought water too." Herolf gave a short grunt of approval. "Good. Today we work harder. Snow falls thick by night. We bring the woodpile higher." Eric felt his chest tighten. The woodpile sat far from the hall, up the hill where the wind whipped hardest. He looked at Svala. She looked back with no fear. Herolf continued. "Children carry small logs. Adults carry the larger." Svala lifted her chin. "I carry more than small." Herolf raised his brow. "Show me." Svala did not step back. She did not hesitate. She walked toward the woodpile behind the hall, grabbed a log heavy enough for a grown woman, lifted it onto her shoulder, and carried it 5 full steps. Herolf stared, impressed. "Good. You carry as you say." Svala set the log down without dropping it. Eric watched her with quiet respect. He tried lifting the same size, managed it with effort, but his knees shook. Svala touched his arm. "We switch. I take heavier today. You take lighter." Eric shook his head. "We match the work." She looked him in the eyes. "We match the load that fits." He did not argue. Svala understood strength better than anyone. Herolf turned to the adults. "We build the pile higher before dusk." The hall emptied. Everyone stepped into the cold. Eric and Svala walked toward the woodpile. Snow reached their knees now. The wind stung their faces. They climbed the small hill. Logs lay stacked unevenly, some half buried, some rolled from the pile in the night. Eric pointed. "We move these first." Svala nodded. She bent to grab a thick piece. Eric grabbed another. They carried them up the hill. Their arms burned. Their legs shook, but they moved without stopping. After 2 trips, Eric paused to catch breath. Svala did not pause. She carried a log up the slope with steady steps. Eric pushed himself to move again. "You rest after this one," Eric said. Svala shook her head. "We move until the pile stands tall." He wanted to scold her. He wanted to tell her she did not need to prove anything. But he knew better. All Viking children proved something each day, not to adults, not even to the gods, to themselves. Hours passed. The sky brightened. Snow continued to fall in thin flakes that stuck to their hair and cloaks. Eric lost count of how many logs he lifted. His arms felt heavy. His knees burned. Herolf passed by them on his way back from the forest. He watched them for a moment. "You keep strong pace," he said. Eric stayed quiet. Svala answered, "We finish before night." Herolf nodded. "Good." He walked back toward the hall. Svala set her log on the pile. Her breath came fast. Her cheeks turned red from cold. "You should rest," Eric said. She shook her head. "You rest. I still have strength." Eric knew she lied. Svala worked past her own limits. She always did. He grabbed her wrist. Her skin felt like ice. "Svala, stop." Her eyes softened. "Only a little more." They moved slower, but kept placing logs. By midday, Brindis came with warm broth in a wooden pot. She waved them toward her. "Drink," she said. "Your hands freeze." Eric took the bowl. His fingers tingled as they wrapped around it. Svala held hers tight to pull heat into her palms. Brindis watched them. "You two push harder than some grown men." Svala lowered her bowl. "Then we do enough," Brindis sighed. "Children should grow slow. You grow too fast." Eric stared at the broth. "The cold does not wait for us." Brindis softened. "Eat more." They drank the broth. Warmth returned to their limbs. Svala placed her bowl aside and stood. Eric frowned. "All ready?" Svala pointed at the sky. "Light falls soon. We finish before dark." They returned to work. Eric lifted smaller logs now, but he lifted without break. He learned from Svala that pride meant little when the haul needed weight carried. He learned that strength came from steady steps, not from boasting. Svala climbed the hill again and again. Her legs moved with rhythm. Her breath came slow but steady. Eric followed her pace. They did not speak. Their bodies spoke for them. Every step spoke of duty. Every lift spoke of hunger. Every return spoke of a need older than either of them, survival. By late afternoon, the pile stood higher than Eric's shoulders. Snow covered its top in white layers. Herolf returned and examined their work. "Well built," he said. "The hall stays warm tonight." Svala nodded, tired but steady. Eric wiped sweat from his brow. His hands shook. Herolf looked at them both. "Now you help with the fences." Eric stiffened. "Fences?" Herolf pointed toward the far edge of the village. "Wolves move close in winter. Children mend the weak posts." Eric exchanged a glance with Svala. She nodded. Of course she nodded. They followed Herolf to the fence line. The posts leaned at strange angles. Snow buried the lower half of the wood. Wolf tracks cut across the nearby brush. Eric swallowed. "They came close," Herolf nodded. "They smell livestock. They smell cold fear. We mend the fence before night." He handed Eric a mallet. He handed Svala a bundle of fresh posts. You two work together. He left them in the cold. Eric inspected the first post. The wood cracked near the base. He pressed harder. It shifted in the snow. We pull this out. Svala grabbed the top. Eric grabbed the bottom. They rocked the post back and forth until it came free. Svala tossed it aside. Eric carried a new post. He drove it into the ground. Svala packed snow around it to steady it. They moved to the next post, then the next. Their breath grew sharp. Their clothes grew wet. Snow stuck to their eyelashes. When they finished, dusk approached. The sky darkened. The air grew colder. Svala leaned on a post for a moment. My legs shake, Eric nodded. Mine too. She pushed herself upright. We walk back now, not slow. They walked toward the hall. Light from the fire shone through the cracks in the wood. Smoke rose through the roof vent. Voices echoed from inside. The smell of stew drifted through the air. They stepped into the hall. Warmth swallowed them. Brenda saw them first. She rushed to them. Sit now. Eric sank to the floor near the fire. Svala sat beside him. Their hands trembled. Brindis placed bowls of hot stew in front of them. Eat before your hands go numb. Eric ate slow. Svala ate faster. Their eyes remained heavy, but steady. Adults talked around them. Men told old stories. Women mended clothes. Children who worked less than Eric and Svala played with carved wooden figures. Herulf approached and stood over the two children. He placed a hand on Eric's shoulder, then on Svala's. You work with strength today, he said. Svala lifted her chin. We do what needs doing. Herulf nodded. You live in a world that presses children hard. Eric looked up at him. We carry the load because we must. Herulf breathed slow. Yes, and the village stands stronger because of you. Eric felt warmth in his chest that did not come from stew or fire. Svala leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. Her voice came soft. Tomorrow brings more. Eric nodded. Yes. Svala opened her eyes and looked at him. We rise early. He nodded again, because Viking children always rose early, and because harsh days pressed harder on those with the smallest shoulders. The sky turned pale blue before Eric and Svala opened their eyes. Neither wanted to rise yet. Their bodies felt bruised. Their arms held the dull ache of work from the day before. Their legs shook when they shifted under their blankets. But Viking children did not rest when pain lingered. Pain meant the day before had shaped them. It did not excuse the day ahead. Eric pushed himself up first. His breath rose in a soft cloud above him. Frost crept along the roof beams. A thin line of heat glowed where the fire fell low during the night. He crawled toward it, reached for the small stick set aside the night before, and fed the flames slow. He blew until the red glow spread through the ashes. Svala sat up behind him. She did not speak. She rubbed her hands together and approached the hearth. She knelt beside Eirik and placed 2 more thin sticks on top of the growing flame. You wake before me, she said, her voice rough with sleep. I did not sleep long, Eirik said. Neither did I. The two watched the fire until it rose enough to warm their faces. Adults still slept. Children near their age still curled under wool blankets. Only Eirik and Svala stood ready to begin the day. Brenda stirred soon after. She pushed herself upright with a tired groan. You two light the fire again? Eric nodded. Brenda shook her head softly. You burn yourself out too fast. Svala answered. The hall does not warm itself. Brenda sighed. Your backs will bend before adulthood. Svala said nothing. She only lifted the water bucket and walked toward the door. Eric followed. Snow fell again during the night. A thin layer covered the path to the stream. They gave each other a short look. No words needed. Both knew what came next. The cold air stung Eric's face as he stepped outside. Svala's hair whipped across her cheek as the wind picked up. They walked through the snow in slow, steady steps. The buckets felt heavier than they did the day before. Their hands still hurt from gripping logs and fence posts. The stream waded ahead. Water rushed through its narrow cut in the earth. Eric dipped the bucket first. His fingers shook. The cold bit his skin. Svala dipped her bucket without hesitation, though her jaw tightened. They carried the water back to the hall. Their arms felt weaker. Their steps felt slower. The villagers needed the water anyway. Inside, the fire grew brighter. Brindis prepared pots for morning broth. She took the buckets from the children and gave each a small piece of dried fish. "Eat," she said, "before you fall." Eric bit into the fish. Svala ate hers in 2 small bites. Brindis shook her head again. "Children should play at this hour," Svala answered. "We do not play." "No," Brindis said. "You do not." Adults rose. Voices grew louder. Boots struck the floor. Cloaks rustled. The longhouse filled with mourning sounds. The chieftain, Herolf, stepped forward with a serious look. "Today we prepare for deeper cold," he said. "We stack more wood. We clear paths to the animal pens. We check the traps near the tree line." Children turned their heads at the mention of traps. They always hoped for rabbits, sometimes foxes, often nothing but cut lines in the snow. Herolf looked at Eirik and Svala. "You two go to the traps with the older boys." Eric straightened. Svala nodded once. Herolf added, "Do not wander. Wolves move early this season." Svala kept her face calm. Eric felt the small shift in his chest. He never liked hearing of wolves. They moved fast and silent, stronger than men. Their eyes glowed in low light. Their hunger never slept. But Eric nodded. "We checked the traps." Herolf walked away. Eric and Svala joined 2 older boys, Harik and Sigmund. Harik carried a spear too tall for him. Sigmund carried a rope coiled at his waist. Svala carried nothing but her small knife, worn from sharpening. Eirik carried a wooden mallet for resetting trap stakes. The 4 walked out into the snow. The sun still sat low behind the hills. A thin line of orange glowed through the gray sky. Their breaths rose in the cold. Snow crunched under their boots. Harik led the group. He walked with confidence he did not always earn. Sigmund walked behind him. Eric and Svala kept pace in the middle. The trees rose ahead, a dark line against the white ground. Eric felt the air change as they reached the forest edge. The cold shifted. The wind died. The smells of pine and earth replaced the open chill. Harik pointed to the first trap. "There!" A simple snare tied between 2 trees. Empty. Sigmund checked the line. "Cut!" Svala knelt and traced the line in the snow. Something bit it. Teeth, not knife. Eirik leaned closer. The rope carried small marks, sharp, curved. Harik frowned. "A fox?" Svala shook her head. "Something larger." Eric stood and looked at the trees. "We checked the next." They moved deeper. The second trap stood near a fallen log. Snow piled on top of the wood. Harik brushed the snow aside. Sigmund gasped. "Rabbit." A small one, frozen stiff. The trap caught it clean. Harik lifted it proudly. "We take this back." Eric nodded. Svala said nothing. They moved to the 3rd trap. Halfway there, Eric stopped walking. Svala stopped behind him. "What is it?" Eric listened. The forest stayed too quiet. No wind, no birds, no cracking branches, nothing. Sigmund noticed too. "Where are the crows?" Harek looked annoyed. Crows fly when they want, Svala's voice came low. Not when something else stands near. Harek scoffed. We checked the trap. He walked forward. Eric grabbed his sleeve. Wait, Harek pulled away. You fear shadows. Eric stared harder into the thick trees. His heart pounded. The silence pressed on his ears. Then he saw it. Tracks. Large, deep. Too deep for fox or deer. Svala saw them next. Her voice barely rose above a breath. Wolves. Sigmund paled. How many? Eric examined the snow. More than 2, less than 5. Harek tightened his grip on the spear. We go back. Svala stepped in front of him. If we run now, they chase. Harek swallowed hard. Then what? Svala and Eric exchanged a look. We move slow, Eric said. We keep backs together. Svala added, we make no sound. They formed a tight line. Harek in front with the spear, Eric behind him, Svala at Eric's side, Sigmund at the back with the rope. Snow fell from above. Every small sound echoed. Eric listened hard. He heard it. Soft steps, to the left, then to the right, circling. Svala whispered, they watch. Harek's breathing grew loud. Quiet, Eric whispered. They walked slow, each step careful, each breath controlled. A branch cracked behind them. Sigmund gasped. Behind, do not turn, Eric said. Turning invites strike. Harek trembled. Then what do we do? Eric swallowed. He felt his pulse in his throat. We reach the open snow. Wolves do not rush out of shadows when light blinds them. Svala added, we move steady, not fast. They continued. The trees thinned. The light grew. Eric felt hope rise in his chest. A low growl came from their left. Harek raised his spear. Another growl came from the right. Sigmund tightened the rope in his hand. Eric whispered, do not run. Svala placed her hand on Eric's arm. Her grip stayed steady. We step out on 3. Eric nodded. 1, he whispered. Harek's breath shook. 2. Svala shifted her feet for balance. 3. They stepped into the open light. The wind returned. So did sound. Crows cawed in the distance. Snow fell in soft flakes again. The open field felt wide and safe. Harek collapsed to his knees. We live. Svala scanned the trees. They do not leave the shadows. Eric stared at the dark line of forest. Golden eyes glowed inside for a brief moment, then vanished. Sigmund whispered, they watched us. Svala nodded. They test us, like adults. Eric felt a coldness deeper than winter. Viking children faced many trials, cold, hunger, work, danger. But wolves tested more than strength. They tested fear. Let's return, Eric said, before they follow again. The 4 walked back toward the hall. Snow crunched under their steps. The world felt louder now, less deadly. But none of them forgot the eyes behind the trees. Inside the longhouse, warmth wrapped around them. Brindis saw their faces and knew at once. What happened? Eric spoke steady. Wolves near the traps. Harolf stepped forward. How close? Svala answered. Close enough to see us, not close enough to strike. Harolf nodded. Then tonight we guard the pens. Eric and Svala exchanged a look. Their day already strained their bodies. Their legs ached. Their arms felt weak. But they knew what came next. Work did not end after fear. It grew. Eirik and Svala stood near the fire with bowls of stew in their hands. Both ate slow, not from enjoyment, but because their bodies forced them to pace themselves. The warmth from the broth sank into their fingers. Their cheeks thawed, but the tightness in their shoulders stayed. The memory of wolf eyes clinging to shadows did not fall away with heat. Harolf stood near the door, speaking with 2 of the older men. His voice stayed low, but carried weight across the hall. Eirik heard fragments. Tracks too close. Children saw the signs. Guard the pens. Eirik lifted his gaze. Svala read the same concern in the adults' faces. Bryndis approached them. You finish your stew? You need strength tonight. Tonight? Eirik asked. Bryndis nodded. Herulf wants watchers. Prowlers circle near the pens. Wolves know our patterns. They strike on nights the village grows tired. Svala finished her stew. We stand with the watchers. Bryndis froze. Children do not stand guard. Svala held her stare. We saw the wolves. We know their steps. Bryndis opened her mouth to argue, but closed it again. Svala did not speak boldly from pride. She spoke from truth. Children who saw the threat knew how close danger walked. Herulf approached, boots striking the floor with a steady rhythm. You two, he said, looking down at Eirik and Svala. You stay inside tonight. Svala stiffened. Why? Because wolves move for meat. They take small bodies first. Eirik lowered his head. Herulf meant no insult. He spoke fact. Wolves lifted children easier than full-grown prey. But we know the places they walk, Svala said. Herulf's voice softened. That is why you stay in the hall. You speak to the men. You tell us where they move. Bryndis placed a hand on Svala's shoulder. You already served the village today. Svala's lips tightened, but she nodded. Eirik stepped forward. I tell them where the wolves stood. Herulf nodded. Good. The next hours passed with the village preparing for nightfall. Adults sharpened spears. Older boys reinforced the door to the livestock pens. Women brought extra logs to the fire. Children gathered near the center, repairing small tools or rubbing warmth into their hands. Eirik and Svala rested near the longhouse wall. Their legs finally relaxed. Their arms felt less like stones. Their hearts still beat fast when they remembered the forest. Svala whispered, Do you think they follow us again tonight? Eirik stared at the beams above. Wolves remember walkers. Svala nodded. Then we watch from inside, eyes open. Eirik agreed. The sun fell behind the hills. Night spread across the sky in slow waves. The torches outside burned bright. Men stood near the pens. Guards held shields ready. No one laughed. No one spoke louder than a whisper. Inside the hall, people settled in for the long night ahead. Bryndis approached Eirik and Svala with small blankets. Wrap yourselves. The cold sinks deeper after the third hour. Svala shook her head. We stay awake. Bryndis frowned. Even awake, keep warm. Eirik took the blanket. Svala finally accepted hers too. Herulf entered the hall again. He carried a thick spear. Snow glistened in his beard. His eyes moved over the villagers. Tonight we keep our animals safe, he said. Wolves press close. They test our walls. But we stand together. A murmur of agreement spread through the hall. Herulf pointed to Eirik and Svala. These two tell us where they saw the shadows. Adults began to gather around them. Eirik stepped forward. They circle near the second trap line. Svala added, They stay in thick trees. They move slow. They watch before they strike. Herulf nodded. Then we place guards on the north side. He signaled, and two men moved toward the pens. Eirik and Svala watched through the small window slit. Torches flickered outside. Snow drifted from the sky. The night felt cold enough to crack stone. Time passed. The hall dimmed. Children slept. Adults whispered. Svala leaned closer to the window. Quiet, Eirik listened. No wind, no birds. The same stillness as the forest. Svala whispered, They move. Eirik pressed his ear against the wooden wall. A soft crunch, then another. Close. He turned to Bryndis. They come. Brindis rushed toward Herolf. The children hear movement. Herolf walked to the window. He listened hard, then he nodded. Guards ready, Herolf said. Eric's breath quickened. A howl split the silence. One call, long, cold, then another answered. Svala whispered, "They gather." Eric steadied his breath. "We stay here." Herolf moved toward the door. "I check the pens from outside. Stay inside." Brindis caught his arm. "Take 2 men." Herolf nodded. 3 adults stepped into the cold. The door shut behind them. Eirik and Svala stood near the wall, watching the flicker of torchlight outside through cracks in the wood. Minutes passed. Too many. Then a shout, Herolf's voice. "Shields up!" A loud snarl echoed. Eirik tensed. "They reach the pens." Svala's jaw clenched. "We go closer." Brindis stepped in front of them. "Stay back." Eirik did not step away. "We see from the wall." Brindis sighed and allowed them near the far corner. They pressed their eyes to a thin gap between boards. Outside, Herolf and 2 men stood in a tight stance near the pen entrance. Wolves circled them, 4 shapes, maybe 5. Their fur bristled. Their teeth glinted under torchlight. Svala whispered, "They stayed hidden until now." Eirik nodded. "They want the goats." Herolf thrust his spear at the nearest wolf. The animal dodged and snapped at his arm. One guard swung a small torch, driving the creature back. Another wolf lunged at the fence. Svala pressed closer to the wall. "The fence weakens there." Eirik saw it too. The post they replaced earlier leaned, slightly. The wolves sensed that weakness. They pushed with their weight. Herolf shouted, "Hold the left side!" But the wolves pressed harder. The post groaned. Svala's eyes widened. "It breaks!" Eirik grabbed Svala's wrist. "If it breaks, the goats run. Wolves chase, men scatter." Svala's voice dropped. "We warn Herolf." Eirik nodded. "We go to the door." They rushed toward Brindis. "We tell them the fence bends." Brindis hesitated. "You do not step outside." Eirik shook his head. "We tell through the door." Brindis pushed the door open by a hand's width. Cold air blasted inside. She shouted through the crack, "Herolf, fence gives at the left." Herolf turned. He saw the post. He cursed under his breath. He moved fast. He thrust his spear into the ground and wedged it behind the fence post. One of the guards shoved snow against the base. The wolves snarled, smelling their chance lost. Svala breathed out. "He stops the break." Eirik nodded. "For now." The wolves backed away. Their breath formed clouds. Their eyes glowed. They paced in circles. Herolf held his spear steady. "Stay tight!" Another wolf lunged from the right. A guard blocked it with his shield. Teeth scraped against wood. Snow churned under their feet. Svala clenched her fists. "They tire soon." Eirik watched the wolves' movements. He studied their rhythm. They test each angle. When all fail, they leave. But the wolves did not leave. Not yet. One smaller wolf crawled low through the snow, trying to slip behind the men. Svala gasped. "There!" Herolf did not see it. Eirik shouted, "Behind you!" Herolf reacted instantly. He swung the torch toward the shadow near his feet. The wolf yelped and darted back. Svala pressed her forehead to the wall. "He lives!" Eric's chest eased. "Yes." Slowly, the wolves backed away. One by one, their growls faded. Their shadows merged with the tree line. The final wolf stopped and stared at the hall for a long moment. Svala whispered, "They remember." Eirik swallowed. "So do we." When the last wolf disappeared into the night, Herolf and the guards returned to the hall. Snow covered their cloaks. Their breaths came fast. Herolf shut the door. He turned to the villagers. "They leave for now," he said. "But they come back soon. They need food." They pick weakness. We grow stronger. His eyes fell on Eric and Svala. You two saw danger before any adult. Your ears saved the fence. Svala stood straight. We heard because the forest stayed silent. Eric nodded. Wolves change sound before they strike. Herulf approached them. Your senses serve the hall. You grow with strength we need. Brindis placed hands on both children's shoulders. Now you rest. But Eirik and Svala did not sit at once. They stared into the fire. They listened to the faint sounds outside. Snow falling, wind shifting, the distant echo of wolves calling each other in. The dark. Svala whispered, "Tomorrow brings harder work." Eirik nodded. "Yes." "Then we rise early," he agreed, because Viking children lived under pressure that never lifted. Danger shaped them before adulthood ever arrived. Morning came slow after the long night of wolf howls and tense silence. Eirik did not know when he finally drifted into sleep. It happened in short moments, between sounds of adults shifting, between logs cracking in the fire, between the faint wind pushing against the walls. But when Brindis shook his shoulder, he rose without complaint. Svala sat up too. Her hair stuck to her cheek. Her eyes carried tired shadows, but she stood at the same pace as every morning. "Up," Brindis said softly. "Light returns, work returns." Eric pushed the blanket aside and stood. His muscles tightened when he straightened. His arms felt heavy. His legs still remembered the forest. But Viking children rose through soreness. Pain did not stop the day. Pain marked the day before. Svala walked toward the door. "Water first," Eric nodded. They stepped outside into the cold. Snow from the night piled high near the path. Their boots sank deeper than expected. The sky glowed pale white, spreading light through the clouds. The air carried a sharp edge. Svala pointed at the hill. "Wind strong last night," Eric nodded. Snow covered half of the fence they repaired the day before. He felt relief that it still stood firm. They walked toward the stream. Snow shifted under their boots. Their legs felt slow at first, then steady with each step. When Eric reached the water, he dipped the bucket. The cold hit his fingers like a blade. He grit his teeth and pulled the bucket upward. Svala dipped hers next. Her hand trembled once, but steadied again. On the walk back, neither spoke. Their breath plumed. The world stayed quiet, except for the crunch of snow and the soft sound of water shifting in their buckets. Inside the hall, the fire burned stronger. Brindis placed more wood on top. She took the buckets and nodded with gratitude. "Herulf wants you both outside early," she said. "He speaks of new tracks near the tree line." Svala's eyes sharpened. "Wolves again?" Brindis shook her head. "Not wolves, something else." Eric frowned. "What else moves this early?" Brindis lowered her voice. "Herulf says he saw signs of strangers." Eric and Svala exchanged a long look. Strangers meant raiders, traders, wanderers, or worse, men who searched for weak villages. Eric stepped closer. "Where?" "Near the far traps. Boot prints, not from our people." Svala crossed her arms. "We go with the guard?" Brindis sighed. "Herulf says you stay near the hall, but he also asks for your eyes. You see things adults miss." Svala lifted her chin. "We watch." Eric nodded. Herulf entered then, shaking snow from his cloak. His voice carried across the hall. "We prepare for watchers today. Strangers move near our land. Wolves returned last night. Both threats stay close." He looked at Eirik and Svala. "You two walk the near paths and report anything unusual. No forest, no far traps." Svala nodded. "We walk." Eric felt a steady focus settle in his chest. This job fit them well. They watched the land with sharper senses than most adults. Herolf stepped closer. Stay together. Return at first sign of danger. Eric nodded. Svala said, "We know how close danger stands." Herolf gave a short grunt of respect. "Good." The two children left the hall again. Snow fell in small flakes. Wind blew from the north. The world outside looked calm, but the calm pressed against them like heavy cloth. It held secrets. Eric led them to the near paths. They scanned ground and trees. They looked for broken branches, strange footprints, or disturbed snow. Svala crouched near a small rise. "Here." Eric stepped beside her. A mark cut across the snow, not from an animal, not from a sled. Something dragged across the surface. "A pole?" Eric asked. Svala touched it. "Or a staff?" Eric looked around. Snow on tree trunks shifted at one side. "Someone passed here," Svala nodded. "Not from our village." Eric followed the line until it faded deeper into the woods. They walked toward the hills. Svala stood. "We tell Herolf." Before they turned, Svala stopped. Eric looked at her. "What?" She pointed farther down the slope. Eric followed her gaze. A footprint, large, human, deep from weight, another beside it. Svala whispered, "More than one." Eric felt the cold sink beneath his skin. "They watch us like the wolves." Svala nodded. "We warn the hall now." They returned to the longhouse at a fast pace. Not running. Running meant panic. Running meant exposure. They moved steady, eyes sharp. Inside, Herolf waited. His expression darkened when he saw their faces. "What did you see?" he asked. Svala answered, "Tracks from men, more than one. They drag something," Eric added. "They walk toward the hills. They stay near the tree line." Herolf lowered his head for a moment. "These strangers test us." Brindis stepped closer. "Do they come near the hall?" Svala shook her head. "Not yet," Eric said. "But they watch." Herolf looked at the men standing nearby. "No one works alone today. Fences stay guarded. Pens watched. The hall stays warm." He turned back to the children. "You stay inside until midday. Then we check again." Eric and Svala nodded, but as they sat near the fire, their bodies restless, the hall felt too still. Adults spoke in careful tones. Children played with carved figures. The tension in the hall felt like the same quiet in the forest. Eric leaned close to Svala. "These strangers move like hunters." Svala nodded. "They wait until we feel weak." Eric remembered the wolves pressing the fence the night before. The threats felt linked. Wolves forced the village's attention. Strangers watched how the village responded. "Herolf needs more eyes," Eric said. Svala lifted her chin. "We give ours." When midday came, Herolf approached them again. "Now you walk the near paths again." "No, farther." Svala nodded. Eric stood. They stepped outside. The snow looked different. It held marks from the village's workers, marks from animals, marks from adults checking fences. But the deeper marks from strangers stayed near the tree line. Svala pointed. "More footprints." Eric examined them. "They moved again." Svala crouched. "They look larger now, one set deeper." Eric's eyes widened. "Someone carried weight." Svala stood tall. "They test our land." They followed the prints only a short distance before stopping where the forest thickened. Eric whispered, "Listen." They held still. A faint sound drifted from the shadows. A step, another, not animals, humans. Svala stepped back. "We return now." Eric nodded. They walked back but kept watching the trees. Eric felt eyes on them. He knew Svala felt it too by the way her breath slowed. When they reached the hall, Herolf stepped forward. "What did you hear?" Svala answered. "Men, near the dark branches." Eric nodded. "They walk in slow steps, not loud." Herolf clenched his jaw. "They test us. They expect weakness." Brindis brought more firewood. "Do we send a group to meet them?" Herolf shook his head. "We do not go blind into the trees." He turned to Eric and Svala. "From now on, you stay close to the hall. Your eyes already gave us more than enough." Svala did not argue. Eric felt relief, but also frustration. He wanted to know who watched them. Then the hall door opened. A man entered, his beard covered with frost. His breath came fast. Herolf stepped forward. "What is it?" The man pointed behind him. "Tracks from the strangers lead south, toward the coast." Eric and Svala exchanged a look. "Raiders?" Eric asked. The man shook his head. "Not raiders. Their steps lack the weight of armor. They move slow. They hide their prints." Svala asked. "Scouts?" The man hesitated. "Yes, scouts." Herolf stood silent for a moment. Then he lifted his spear. "We prepare the hall for defense. Women bring children to the far side. Men guard the entrance." Eric and Svala stood. Herolf looked at them. "You two go to Brindis," Svala said. "We can help." Herolf lowered his voice. "You help by surviving." Eric felt heat rise in his chest. He understood, but it stung. Svala placed a hand on Eric's shoulder. "We listen now." He nodded slowly. They walked with Brindis to the far side of the hall. The fire burned high. People gathered with worried eyes. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow tapped against the roof. The door rattled. Svala whispered, "Strangers come soon." Eric stared at the door. "Yes." The hall grew silent. Steps crunched outside. Slow, deliberate. The door did not open. The steps moved around the hall, circling. Men inside lifted their spears. Women held children close. Brindis gripped Svala's hand. Svala whispered, "They walk like wolves." Eric nodded. "They test the walls." For the second time in 2 days, danger pressed from all sides. The footsteps outside circled the longhouse, slow, steady, and deliberate. Eric felt each one travel through the wooden beams under his feet. Adults held their spears tight. Mothers pressed children close. Svala stood beside Eric, shoulders drawn back, eyes sharp. Herolf lifted a hand. Silence filled the hall. Even the fire crackled softer, as if it knew the danger pressed close. Then the footsteps stopped. No breath, no wind, no sound at all. Svala whispered, "They wait." Eric nodded. "They listen." Herolf stepped toward the door. His boots scraped against the floor. Every villager watched him. Every child held their breath. Brindis held Svala back with one hand, though she knew Svala would not rush forward. Herolf pressed his hand against the door. He did not open it. He listened. A faint whisper drifted through the wood, too soft to understand, too soft to track, but the tone carried intent. A deep voice, calm, cold. Herolf stepped back. "They speak a tongue I do not know." A murmur spread through the hall. Eric felt a small shift beside him. Svala leaned closer. "These are not men from nearby villages?" Eric's heart thudded. "They come from far." Herolf signaled 2 men. They moved quietly toward the windows carved high into the wall. They pressed their eyes to the narrow slits. One man whispered, "I see 3. Another whispered, "No, 4. A soft crunch came from the far side of the hall. More footsteps. Svala's jaw tightened. "They surround us." Eric swallowed. His throat felt dry. "Like the wolves." Herulf raised his voice loud enough to reach the guards, but quiet enough to avoid carrying outside. They test our walls first. They want to see if we break. The tapping on the roof came next. Light, careful. Eric flinched. Someone climbed the outside beams. A young woman near the fire gasped. Brindis shushed her quickly. Svala stared upward. They search for weak points. Herulf nodded. They are scouts. They measure our strength. But why? Sigmund asked from the far corner, voice shaking. Herulf did not answer because everyone already knew the answer. Scouts measured weakness. Weakness invited attack. The tapping on the roof stopped. Silence took the hall again. Herulf stood frozen. He waited. He counted breaths. The villagers followed his lead. 5 breaths, 10 breaths, 12. No sound. Finally, Herulf spoke. They leave the roof. Eirik moved closer to the wall. He wanted to hear what passed outside. Svala followed, standing beside him. Through the thin wood, they heard shifting snow. Footsteps retreating. Slow. No rush. No panic. They were not afraid of being caught. That frightened Eric more. Svala whispered, "They leave because they know enough." Eric nodded. "They leave because they return later." Herulf approached the children. "You two saw their signs before anyone. What did you see today?" Eric answered first. Their steps stayed careful. Too careful. They moved like trained hunters. Svala added. They dragged something behind them, a pole or staff, maybe to mark paths. Herulf listened with narrowed eyes. Marking paths means they plan to return tonight or soon after. Svala nodded. They watch how we stand. Herulf turned to the guards. Check the outside now. Quiet. Measure distance to the tracks. 2 men slipped out the door with spears and torches. The cold rushed in for a moment before the door shut again. The hall waited. Eric and Svala returned to their place near Brindis. The old woman placed a hand on each of their shoulders. Children should not know this level of fear. Svala stared at the doorway. We know what we must. Eric watched the shadows dance across the walls. Fear teaches, Brindis sighed. Fear steals childhood. Svala said softly, Childhood leaves us early. The door opened again. The 2 guards returned. One spoke first. Tracks lead south. They move toward the ridge. Far ridge? Herulf asked. No, the near ridge. Murmurs spread again. The near ridge sat close enough to watch the entire village. Herulf raised a hand. Quiet. The hall went silent. They do not attack yet, he said. Scouts never strike first. They wait for the main group. We prepare for tonight. Eric felt Svala shift her weight. Something pressed her mind. What is it? Eric whispered. She lowered her voice. Wolves came before the scouts. Wolves weakened our walls. Strangers test us after. Eric frowned. Linked? Svala nodded. Strangers use wolves as a sign, a way to measure fear. Eric's breath caught. Both tests in 2 nights, Svala said. 3rd night brings the real threat. Eric stared at her. He wanted to say she was wrong. He wanted to say the strangers might leave. But he trusted Svala's instincts. They saved them many times before. Herulf walked past the hall with a group of men. We fortify the pens. We sharpen spears. We move the goats inside before dusk. Svala stepped forward. We help. Herulf shook his head. You 2 stay inside today. You did enough. Eric disagreed, with every part of him. We work like everyone. Herulf's expression softened, but stayed firm. You saw danger before any of us. That is your strength. Now you rest. Your eyes stay sharp only if your bodies stay alive. Eric looked down, but did not argue. Svala stepped closer to him. We help in other ways. Eric nodded. We listen. They sat near the fire, while adults moved outside. The hall rumbled with footsteps and tools. People hammered beams against walls. Others placed sharpened stakes in the snow. The village turned from resting to preparing. Children watched. Some whispered worries. Others cried softly. Eric and Svala stayed silent. Brindis returned with warm broth. She handed them each a bowl. "You drink," she said. "Your hands still shake." "I do not shake," Svala said. Brindis raised her brow. "Your fingers say otherwise." Svala looked at her hand. It trembled slightly. She tightened her grip on the bowl to hide it. Eric drank slowly. The warmth eased the cold that sat heavy in his chest. Svala finally took a sip. Her shoulders loosened. Hours passed. Afternoon light dimmed. Men moved inside with goats. The animals bleated nervously. Their hooves clattered across the wooden floor. Women tied them near the far wall. Brindis muttered, "Animals inside the hall again. Winter grows worse each year." Herolf stood near the door. "It keeps them alive," Eric whispered. "What keeps us alive?" Svala answered. "Strength, eyes, fire." Night approached. Torches outside flickered. The sky turned deep blue. The ridge to the south grew dark. Shadows stretched from the tree line toward the village. Eric felt his heartbeat grow slow and steady, not from calm, from readiness. He turned to Svala. "Your idea about the third night." Svala's voice lowered. "It comes soon, tonight or tomorrow." Eric stared at the far door. Adults tightened stances. Children huddled close. Svala whispered, "Tonight tests our village again." As if her words summoned it, the first sound cut through the air. A horn, not from their village, from the ridge, deep, long. Men froze. Herolf stepped forward. "Scouts call others," Brindis gasped. "Tonight? Already?" Svala squeezed Eric's arm. "Third night begins now." The second horn answered, closer. Wind shifted. Torches outside flickered. Footsteps approached the hall. Not wolves, not scouts. Many, heavy, certain. Eric's breath hitched. Svala whispered without fear, "They come." The hall braced. The horn blast faded into the night, but its weight stayed heavy in every ear inside the longhouse. Eric felt the air tighten. Every adult stood ready. Every child froze. Even the goats fell silent. Svala stepped closer to the wall. Her voice stayed steady. "They gather near the ridge, many." Eric nodded. "More than we can count." Herolf moved toward the door, gripping his spear. Snow blew in through the small cracks as the wind pushed hard from the south. Footsteps approached, not light and careful like the scouts. Heavy, coordinated. The march of people who expected no struggle. Herolf raised his hand. "Shields ready. No one steps into the open." Two men braced the door. Others positioned themselves near the windows. Women moved children to the far corner. Brindis guided Eirik and Svala behind the fire, but Svala shook her head. "We see better near the wall," Brindis whispered. "You stay where I place you." Svala looked up at her. "We give warning." Brindis hesitated, then nodded once. She trusted them too much to block their instincts now. Svala positioned herself near the wall, listening close. Eric joined her. They could feel vibrations through the wood. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Many feet in deep snow. Eric whispered, "They walk slow." Svala said, "They walk without fear." Voices rose outside, low, harsh, a language neither child recognized. Not from nearby clans, not from trading groups that passed in warmer seasons. These strangers wore their danger like clothing. Herolf signaled for silence. Then he pressed his ear to the door. The village waited. Snow hit the roof. Wind howled. The fire crackled low. Then a voice called out from outside, a man's voice, deep and cold. "Open your door." Herolf did not answer. The voice called again. "We know you watch." Eric felt Svala's breath steady beside him. Her eyes narrowed. The voice continued. "We come with need." Herolf finally answered through the wood. "State your need from where you stand." A long pause. Then the voice responded. "We need food, warmth, shelter." Herolf's eyes hardened. "We have none to spare." The voice outside changed tone, still calm, still cold. "You spare what we take." Men inside tightened grips on their spears. Herolf stepped closer to the door. "Leave now. You walk on our land without invitation." The voice answered, "This land belongs to no one who cannot defend it." Svala whispered, "He speaks for many." Eric swallowed. "Too many." A loud crack hit the door. Someone struck it from outside. Snow fell from the roof. The goats bleated. Another crack. The men inside braced the door harder. Herolf shouted, "Hold it!" Eirik ran forward on instinct. Svala grabbed his sleeve. "No, we must help hold." "We help in other ways." She pointed to the far corner. "The beams behind the fire. They shift when pushed." Eric's eyes widened. "If they break the front, the wee hall collapses." Svala nodded. "We tell Herolf." They rushed to the chieftain's side. Eric spoke fast. "The hall wall behind the fire weakens when pushed." Svala added, "If they break the door, they push the back beam to break the hall." Herolf stared at them. "Are you certain?" Both nodded without hesitation. Herolf turned to two men. "Reinforce the back wall now." The men ran to the far side of the hall. They placed heavy stones at the base and braced wooden planks across the beam. Another loud crack hit the door. It shook hard. Herolf raised his spear. "Shield wall!" 5 men stepped beside him with round shields. They held the door with their full weight. Outside, the strangers spoke again. Their voices rose, a chorus of men. Then the sound shifted. Snow crunched as they stepped back. Eirik whispered. They prepared a strike. Svala nodded once. All at once. Eric's breath hitched, then impact. The entire hall shook. The door bent inward. The shields buckled. Men grunted under pressure. The beam above the door groaned. Herolf shouted, "Hold!" Another strike, harder. Svala pressed her ear to the wall. "More than 6, maybe 10, Eric whispered. "Maybe more." Another hit. The door splintered. Herolf roared, "Hold!" A small crack opened at the top corner. Cold wind blasted through it. A stranger's hand appeared, gloved in fur, fingers thick. Svala grabbed Eric's arm. "They try to pry!" Eric shouted. "Block the corner!" One of the guards shoved his shield upward, trapping the hand. The stranger yelped outside. The shield slammed down again. The hand slipped free, but the door bent inward again. Svala scanned the hall fast. Her eyes moved with speed Eirik trusted. She pointed at the stacked firewood near the wall. "Use logs," she said. Eric understood at once. They rushed toward the pile. Eric lifted a heavy piece. Svala grabbed 2 smaller ones. They ran to the doorway. "Place them!" Svala shouted. The men closest to the gap kicked space beneath the door. Eric shoved the logs into the crack. Svala drove hers under the hinge side. Herolf shouted, "Good!" Another strike. The log shifted, but held. A deep voice outside called out again. "Enough games. We take what we need." He barked an order. The strangers backed away. Eric felt dread pool in his stomach. "They run for something else." Svala listened. "They gather speed." Eric's eyes widened. "A ram." The sound came next. Many feet running together. The rhythm of people charging with force. Svala whispered, "The real blow comes now." Herolf braced his spear against the floor. "Hold!" The charge hit the door like a hammer. The hall shook. A bowl fell from a shelf. Goats bleated louder. Children screamed. Brindis pulled them close. Svala steadied her breath. Again, Eric nodded. Again. The second charge struck. The beam above the door cracked. Herolf shouted, "Brace it!" Two men lifted another beam and pressed it against the door frame. Snow dust fell from the roof with each hit. Outside, the strangers regrouped. They prepared for a third hit. Inside, the hall waited in silent terror. Svala stepped close to Eirik. "If the third strike breaks the door..." "We stand near the fire," Eric said, finishing her thought. "Smoke blinds them. Heat slows them." Svala nodded. "We protect the children first." Eric looked at Brindis, holding younger ones, looked at mothers clutching babies, looked at older children pressed against the wall in fear. He felt something shift in him. He felt older than yesterday. Svala looked at him. "Ready?" Eric nodded. "Ready." The third charge came. The door cracked wide. A plank tore free. Cold air burst through. A man's face appeared through the gap. His eyes wild, his beard frosted. Snow stuck to his fur hood. Herolf thrust his spear. The stranger jerked back with a shout. Another stranger grabbed the door from outside and pulled. Herolf rammed his shoulder into it. The guards pressed harder. Eric saw something new through the widening crack. Torchlight. Not from the hall, from the strangers. They carried flames. Svala whispered, "They burn the hall." Eric shouted, "Herolf, they bring fire." Herolf reacted at once. "Buckets! Water now!" Brindis ran to the pot. Women grabbed buckets. Men shifted to prepare for flame. The strangers outside shouted to each other. Eric didn't know the words, but he knew the meaning. Fire came next. Svala moved first. "We guard the fire pit." Eric grabbed her arm. "We choke sparks with snow." The children rushed outside through the small side door near the animals, slipping into the cold before adults stopped them. Brindis shouted, "Get back inside!" But Eirik and Svala ignored her. They ran behind the hall where snow piled deep. They scooped it into their cloaks and carried heavy bundles to the front door. Herolf saw them. "You two, they bring fire," Svala said. "We smother sparks." Herolf did not argue. The strangers stepped forward with burning branches. They swung them toward the hall's roof, trying to ignite the dry straw trim. Eric and Svala threw snow upward. Flames hissed and died. The strangers shouted in frustration. Herolf shouted to his warriors, "Push the door!" The men surged forward. The door pressed outward an inch. The strangers stumbled. Svala scooped more snow. Eric followed. They threw it at the base of the roof again. More smoke. Less flame. The strangers retreated one step. Herolf saw the moment. "Push!" The men slammed the door outward again. The strangers reeled back. Herolf roared, "Now!" The hall door burst open. The guards surged into the night with shields. The strangers stumbled and slipped in the snow. Their torches fell from their hands. Fire hissed out in the snow. Svala whispered, "Now!" Eric nodded. Herolf's warriors drove. The strangers backed toward the ridge. The strangers shouted, regrouping, but the villagers outnumbered them now that the children had extinguished the flames. Eric watched Herolf knock a stranger to the ground. Another guard shoved two more back. The strangers realized their loss. They turned and fled into the night. Silence settled, heavy, cold. Herolf lowered his spear. "They leave!" Eric heard his own heartbeat slow. Svala released a breath she held for too long. The villagers gathered outside. The danger passed, for now. Brindis pulled Eric and Svala into a tight embrace. "You two foolish, brave children," Herolf approached. Your snow saved our hall. Eric shook his head. We saw fire. Svala nodded. We acted. Herolf placed a hand on each of their shoulders. You carry strength beyond your small frames. Tonight, the village stands because of you. Eirik felt warmth spread through his tired body. Svala looked at the ridge. They return? Herolf's face darkened. Not tonight, maybe never. They saw our strength. Even our children fight winter with courage. Svala looked at Eirik. We rise early tomorrow. Eirik nodded. Yes, because Viking children live through harsh days that shape them faster than time, and they survived. You stayed with me through the final moment of this long story. Thank you. If you want more calm Viking tales, stay close for the next video. I prepared something free for you too, a peaceful Viking night soundscape linked at the end. Rest now. Breathe slow. Feel warmth settle over you. I will see you in the next story.